Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into the absolutely fascinating ways the human mind defends itself, innovates, and ultimately evolves. We're going to unpack how we navigate this crazy world through 5 distinct psychological mechanisms. It's literally a brilliant journey, taking us all the way from the everyday jokes we crack right up to the very highest levels of human thought. So let's get into it. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The power of humor. 2. Protecting the self. 3. The mechanics of creativity. 4. Nurturing true giftedness. And 5. Achieving balance through wisdom. All right, starting with section 1, the power of humor, acting as our psychological shield. You know, humor isn't just about getting a quick laugh. Psychologically speaking, it's a completely vital coping skill. So I actually want you to ask yourself right now, what's your sense of humor? Psychologists have identified 9 distinct types of humor that we use to handle life's curveballs. We're talking everything from physical slapstick to witty wordplay to those self-deprecating jokes we all make. Which one do you naturally lean on when things get stressful? Let's check out a few fascinating examples. Maybe you're someone who leans right into the absurd. If so, you're using surreal humor to playfully distort reality. Think about a silly comic where a character is just looking for a regular coat hook, but then out of nowhere wants something shaped like an S, and then suddenly the coat itself actually transforms into an S shape. I mean, it makes absolutely no logical sense, right? But that is exactly the point. Surreal humor totally breaks the rules of reality, just to give our brains a much-needed playful escape. Or maybe observational humor is more your speed. This is all about poking fun at everyday life, pointing out those hilarious truths that are just hiding in plain sight. Take a brilliant twist on the classic Little Red Riding Hood story, for example. Imagine that instead of the classic ending, the wolf, disguised as the grandmother, bluntly tells Little Red Riding Hood that she is, by far, her least favorite grandchild. It takes this super familiar scenario and injects a really dry, unexpected social observation. It's funny precisely because it subverts our everyday expectations. And then there's dark humor. Now, what's truly interesting here is how the actual mechanics of comedy deal with incredibly dark subjects. For instance, you might see a highly politically charged joke regarding a figure like Donald Trump and a presidential assassination. Now, just to be completely clear, we are looking at this impartially and strictly from a psychological standpoint today, not a political one. We aren't endorsing any viewpoints, but the psychological mechanism at play is that dark humor relies on shocking, depressing, or highly sensitive subjects strictly for its mechanical comedic structure. Why on earth do we do this? Well, research shows that throwing comical situations into deeply dark settings acts as a vital psychological shield. In fact, professionals in incredibly stressful or traumatic jobs like nurses and emergency room doctors frequently use dark humor as a protective mechanism. It's even been found to enhance resilience during some of the most horrific events in human history, literally allowing people to process the unthinkable. But hey, we definitely have to note that humor isn't some universally positive magic pill. The type of humor you exhibit drastically changes its impact on your life. Affiliative and self-enhancing humor, those actually boost our overall well-being. They help us bond with others and cope. However, aggressive or self-defeating styles, like constant harsh sarcasm or always making yourself the butt of the joke, are really detrimental. Over time, those negative styles can actually damage our self-esteem and seriously reduce the quality of our relationships. Moving on to section 2, protecting the self through the magic of deception. So, what happens when a joke simply isn't enough to shield us from severe trauma or overwhelming odds? Well, that's when our brains bring out the big guns, employing a much more profound defense mechanism. Back in 1989, psychologist Shelley E. introduced this groundbreaking concept known as positive illusions. She defined positive illusions not as unhealthy delusions, but as a healthy, highly creative form of self-deception. Instead of facing cold, hard reality 24/7, our minds naturally inflate our abilities, create unrealistic optimism about the future, and give us an illusion of control. And honestly, this isn't a bug in our mental software, it's a feature. It helps us stave off discomfort and maintain hope even when we're facing completely uncontrollable risks. Our minds pull off this incredibly adaptive magic trick through 3 primary cognitive processes. First up is selective attention, meaning we literally filter information so we pretty much only notice the positive news about ourselves. Second is benign forgetting, where we just happen to conveniently forget negative information or past flaws. And third, my personal favorite, pockets of incompetence. We completely ring-fence the areas where we lack skills, declaring them exceptions so we can preserve a mostly competent image of ourselves. The crucial takeaway here is that our brains are actively editing reality just to keep us moving forward. And let me tell you, these illusions are powerfully adaptive in the real world. Consider this absolutely astonishing finding. Psychological studies show that cancer survivors often report a higher quality of life than people who have never been sick at all. By utilizing positive illusions, they're able to take a profoundly traumatic experience and use it to evoke an increased sense of meaning and purpose. It is just a stunning testament to the resilience of the human mind. Okay, Section 3, the mechanics of creativity, thinking in novel ways. Once our minds finally feel protected, safe, and optimistic, whether we used humor or positive illusions to get there, we're suddenly freed up to innovate. And when we talk about creativity, psychologists actually draw a very clear distinction between two types. First, there's little c creativity. This involves those relatively common, small enhancements and departures from our daily routines. You know, things like finding a cool new way to organize your desk or tweaking a family recipe. Then there's big C creativity. This is the rare, groundbreaking stuff. We're talking major cultural innovations that completely change entire fields of study or even society itself. So how exactly does that big C creativity happen? Well, Sternberg and Lubart's investment theory brilliantly illustrates this process using an economic metaphor. It's basically the stock market, but for your brain. They suggest that highly creative people essentially buy low and sell high in the realm of ideas. They adopt poorly developed, unpopular, or completely unfamiliar ideas. That's buying low. Then they invest their time and their intellectual energy into them, persisting against massive resistance from their peers until that idea finally gains mainstream acceptance, which is selling high. It takes an immense amount of sensible risk-taking and sheer persistence. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, nurturing true giftedness and going way beyond just raw intelligence. But where does this incredible creative drive even come from? Is it enough to just be born with high general intelligence, or is there more to the equation? If you've ever wondered what makes someone truly gifted, Renzulli's famous three-ring model gives us the answer. It essentially proves that raw, innate ability, like a high IQ, isn't nearly enough on its own. True giftedness only happens at the precise intersection of three things: outstanding general ability, high creativity, and deep task commitment. You gotta be smart, you gotta think outside the box, and you have to be wildly motivated to practice and master your talent. Because keeping those three rings together is so incredibly demanding, the research points to a pretty surprising reality. Only a tiny minority of gifted children ever actually evolve into highly creative adults who make major innovative contributions. Sometimes they lack the right environment to support them, or sometimes they reach an early understanding of heavy moral problems way before they have the emotional maturity to actually cope with them. So as it turns out, raw potential does not always equal outcome. And finally, Section 5. Achieving balance through wisdom, the ultimate evolution. This brings us to the final evolution of the human mind, wisdom. When raw intellect, creativity, and the ability to navigate life's challenges mature, they transform into something far more profound than just being smart. Sternberg's balance theory is a fantastic way to visualize this. He views wisdom as this ever-expanding circle of focus and balance. It starts at stage 1, our intrapersonal goals, where we're looking out for our own personal wishes and identity. Then, as we become wiser, that circle expands to stage 2, considering our interpersonal relationships and what's good for the people immediately around us. And finally, true wisdom reaches stage 3, encompassing extrapersonal interests. This means making decisions that benefit the wider organization, the community, or society as a whole. Wisdom at its core is applying intelligence to achieve the common good. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on today. When we look around the world and see leaders, professionals, or even ourselves failing in our duties, is it really because there's a lack of conventional intelligence? Or is it actually because there is a distinct lack of this crucial balancing wisdom? It's the difference between knowing how to do something and knowing if it's the right thing to do for the common good. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the adaptive mind. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.